Welcome, everybody. This is Renee Miller from reneemiller.org. And many of you have asked about what my sacred space is like that's in my closet. And so I decided to give you a little tour today. It's a regular closet. You'll see just a plain old square closet with my few little clothes on one side and my sacred space on the other. And the first thing you see when you look at this little prayer space is this calendar, and you'll notice it's from August of 2018. This calendar was given to me by my dad, who gave me one every year from Arizona Highways because, of course, we loved Arizona. And I was going to throw it out and put a 19 calendar up here, but I thought, no, I'm just going to continue to reuse this calendar and let it be the focal point of my prayer space. And so when I come in here, the first thing I do is I am reminded of the verse out of Scripture that says, "Teach us to number our days that we may apply our hearts to wisdom." And so I always begin my prayer time with that as a reminder that I need to be attentive to this day, pay attention to what's happening today, and be grateful for this day. Moving over to the right, you'll see a rosary, my mother's rosary, although I've changed the cross and have put a little Jerusalem cross on it that I particularly love. And then up above that is a little angel that one of my parishioners and friends, Diane Higginbotham, found on the ground while she was feeding her cats in the little town of Marianna, Arkansas. And so she sent that to me, and so my little angel is there to remind me always of the importance of angels in our lives. And if we move down to the actual prayer space, we see that there are some items over here on the left which remind me of the communion of saints, that there's very little between us and those who have gone before us. And so these couple of leather items have things in them that have to do with my father and my mother. And then these two tins, many of you have heard me speak about the chaparral. That was my grandmother's, the little leaves from the chaparral tree in the desert. And this particular tin is probably, over 50 years old now. But inside are these little, just what you would think, dried leaves, but they have an intoxicating fragrance. It is the scent of the desert after a rain, and it makes me know that I have my soul home with me wherever I happen to be. So then we move on. I have a candle that my son gave me, which is wearing out now, and he needs to give me a new one. And then I have another candle that Phoebe Miller from the congregation made sure I had from our candles at church. And the little votive holder, I should say, was given to me from my mom years ago. And so I always like to keep that there. Then on the left-hand side, you will see here a laminated card of Saint Therese of Lisieux. This particular picture is on a wall in one of the churches in Paris, France, where I pray, and it's just outside the apartment where I stay. And I took a picture of it years ago, laminated, and always keep it here. Saint Therese of Lisieux is the patron saint of France, but more importantly, she has been formative in my life since I was young. Then you will see my pyx, which is what the priest uses to take communion, and in it I keep my blessed wafers, just so you see how that works. And there they are. And this is important to me because sacraments are at the heart of my life. Then you'll see now my little council of saints. My council of saints are the people who have been and are, continue to be mentors and wise ones in my life. So let me tell you about each of them briefly. Up at the top left is Carl Sagan, a quantum physicist, who has been very formative for me in terms of science and looking beyond what I see to see deeper things. Next to him is Leo Tolstoy, the fabulous, fantastic, amazing Russian author, one of many greats in Russia, but whom also has impacted me greatly. Next to him, a familiar figure, Mother Teresa of Calcutta, who, apart from being a wonderful saint in her own right, has really touched my life since I was quite young and has formed a lot of who I am now. Next to her is Leonardo da Vinci, a younger picture of him, and I have him there because Leonardo was a Renaissance person, and he also understood a lot about holistic living, and he reminds me to keep asking questions. Second row on the left, Elizabeth I, Queen of England, who was an incredible woman and leader, and reminds me what it is to be a leader and how to be comfortable in my own skin. Next to her, of course, is St. Therese of Lisieux again. And then, next to St. Therese, we've got Albert Einstein, a famous scientist, and a reminder to me that things are not always as they seem, and again, to look for the deeper questions and answers. Next to him is Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, and Steve Jobs, gosh, was an incredibly brilliant genius. He was also a minimalist, and that's very important to me. He also reminds me that life is often difficult in our relationships, and he was a hard man to get along with, but his mind was incredible, and he was able to do incredible things as a result. Next to him, you can't see him very well, is my friend Jonathan, who was a friend of mine when I lived in Memphis and owned a landscape company. And Jonathan taught me a lot about business, about entrepreneurship, and about relationships. On the bottom row, we have the first picture of Jesus wrapped in a shroud, and I love this picture because it's so different from the usual pictures we see of Jesus, and it reminds me to think of him differently, not to just accept the normal things that we've all been raised to think, but to look for deeper things. Next to him is the Indian poet Rabindranath Tagore, who has been very formative in my understanding of poetry, but even more in terms of his writing about the beauty of life and the beauty of God. Next to him is a picture some of you have seen before. It's my mother, the great dancer and the great saint, who words can't express how much I love my mother. Next to her is Paramhansa Yogananda, who was a yogi and was very formative in my life when I even was a child. My grandmother had his book, The Autobiography of a Yogi, and his peacefulness and his meditation and his ability to use yoga as a pathway has been very formative to me and in my yoga practice since before I was 18 years old. And now, of course, I will have to add my father to my council of saints because he truly was a saint in my life. Again, very much like Steve Jobs, not the easiest man to live with at times, but a man who helped me to look beyond what I saw, keep asking questions, go deeper, and never be afraid to try something new. Then, of course, we've got my prayer book and my Bible. So all of this sits on top of my plastic or Sterlite dresser. And before I end, I just want to show you my little chair and the little blanket that I use to wrap around my shoulders when I pray. It was a gift from another parishioner, Donna Brown, when she went to Spain, and it has these beautiful cranes on it, which again reminds me of the importance of meditation, of being, and of being mindful. And now, just before I end this 10-minute video, I want to close the curtains and let you see what it's like when I actually sit down. It's darkened. I look at my calendar. and I say, teach us to number our days, that we may apply our hearts to wisdom. Thanks everyone for joining me. This is Renee Miller at reneemiller.org.